Welcome to the Film Focus Online podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Lyons. Halloween season is upon us, so today we're talking about horror movies. Joining me today is Film Focus senior writer and resident horror expert, Becca Johnson. How are you?
All good. We'll see how that use of the word expert goes as we carry on, but self-confessed horror girly might be more accurate.
On today's show, we're going to talk plenty of horror. We'll start with some more recent releases in a segment we're calling Trick or Treat, and then we'll move on to some of Becca's horror favourites.
Let's do it. There's so much to talk about. There's been a lot of releases this October, and a lot of them are on streaming as well. So,
before we get on to that, we're going to talk some recently watched. So I know you've seen this as well, but Smile 2 recently came out in cinemas. I wasn't a massive fan of the first one. However, the second one intrigued me, and I was pleasantly surprised. I felt like it's expanded on the first one, genuine jump scares. I thought Naomi Scott was absolutely brilliant in her role, and the ending has left it in a very interesting place, I feel. What were your thoughts on Smile 2?
I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I hoped I would. My main issue with it was not necessarily a fault of the movie, but the trailer spoiled everything. I try and avoid trailers where I can, but it's not always possible. And every good kill, every reveal was in the trailer, so that was a bit disappointing. And I think I liked that it was a bit bigger, a bit bolder, a bit more gore, more kills, more people involved in the situation. That was all great. I just feel like it peaked in the first act. That opening sequence is so much fun, and I don't think the rest of the movie lives up to that energy. I did love it though. The performances were great. I loved Naomi Scott. Yeah, exactly. That whole sequence at the start with Kyle Gallner I thought was utterly fantastic.
Yeah, I really liked when he came back into it, when she went and visited him. That was one of my favourite parts. You didn't quite know, you kind of know what's going on because obviously you've seen the first one, but you're not sure where it's going to go with it. And that kill really did get me.
Yeah, for sure. And the practical effects as well, and CGI and things at the end went a bit further than I expected.
Yes, certainly. So why don't you tell us something that you've been watching recently?
So going off horror just for a sec, I've just been to London Film Festival. I didn't do the whole thing. I just went for a few days. But the one I want to just bring to the forefront a little bit here, because I want to get people talking about it, it is We Live in Time. It's got Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield in it, and obviously everyone knows the deal with this film, but it doesn't release in the UK until the 1st of January. So I want to keep it on everybody's radars. It was really, really good. Obviously take some tissues. If you've seen the trailer, you'll know why. But it is a really, really lovely story. It just explores kind of a relationship between a couple, the ups, the downs. It's very relatable. The performances are fantastic. And as much as it is a tearjerker, it was really, really funny as well. Like, the most I've laughed in the cinema maybe all year, which was a nice surprise. It had lots of moments of levity to help those heartbreaking moments. But it was really fantastic. I just hope people don't forget about it by January, because it is totally worth watching, especially in cinema.
Made famous by the horse meme.
Exactly that.
So hopefully that will keep it on people's radars, like you said. So something else I've been watching is a TV show coming out on Sky in November, I believe. It's called Day of the Jackal. It stars Eddie Redmayne and Lashana Lynch. I've only seen the first five episodes. I can't say too much about it because embargoes haven't lifted and all that. But I really do think this will be on people's radars. People will like this. It's basically about paid assassin, and it's a cat and mouse chase basically, and it's really, really fun, creative. Eddie Redmayne brilliant in his role, Lashana Lynch chasing him. So yeah, as I said, can't say too much about it, but I think people should keep an eye on this one, and it comes out next month.
I hadn't even heard of this one before today, so
came across my radar quite in the blue, but straight away interested. And I'm really enjoying it so far. I've got 5 more episodes to watch, so I'm halfway through, but it's sat in a really good place at the minute.
That sounds good.
So something else you've been watching
Yep, I've actually now seen it twice. So Terrifier 3, we can't do this episode without talking about Terrifier 3 for multiple reasons. The first one being that it's just generally fantastic. Have you seen any of the Terrifier films?
Not.
You need to.
No.
You need to get on that. So
I know.
I don't want to spoil too much, especially as a lot of listeners might not have seen it yet either. Definitely go and see it. But the kills, obviously, it's really famous for its kills, and I do think this one could be the gnarliest one so far. There's also a lot of comedy in here, and there's a Christmas vibe as well. I know it seems a little bit early, but it is a really good Christmas kind of setting, and I do think that we are lacking good Christmas horrors, especially modern ones. Art the Clown, obviously infamous. He's absolutely brilliant, played perfectly by David Howard Thornton. Just such a brilliant performance, and he really, as the franchise goes on, he just becomes this character, and we've got a really good final go on our hands with Sienna Shaw as well. She's definitely one of the better ones that we've had in modern day.
Definitely becoming an infamous part of the horror franchise now, I think. Obviously, the first one was very small, and they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as they come along. I think this one's made about 40 million in the US.
Yeah,
Probably
and I was at the infamous
quite a lot
screening
more.
where apparently 11 people walked out. So it was really fun to watch with a crowd. I went to see it last night. Obviously, it's been out a couple of weeks by now, but there was still quite a few people in there, and people were quite reactive. So it's definitely one to see on the big screen.
That's the whole thing, though, isn't it? They've marketed it in a way that's going to get people to the cinemas 2 weeks, 3 weeks later.
Definitely.
After it's been released, which at the end of the day is great marketing. We're not sure how many people actually walked out of that screening.
No, I was too engrossed in the film, which is complimentary, but
That's
yeah.
good. That actually moves me on quite nicely to talking, just before we get into our trick or treat segment, I think we should talk about the state of the horror genre, where it's at. Box office wise, this year we've had films like Longlegs, which has made over 100 million. It's become more and more frequent that horror films are going big at the box office. Even less so horror films like Quiet Place, stuff like that. But people seem to be turning out for this stuff. Why do you think that is?
I think it's going back to just wanting original ideas. A lot of them are part of franchises, so that doesn't ring completely true. But with your Longlegs, things like that, like people want to be scared. I think the horror genre is the genre that lends itself best to watching in a group setting as well in a cinemas, because people want to be scared. They want to have that shared experience. And we've had some really good ones this year. I wouldn't say this year is as good as 2022, but I think we've had some really good ones, like mentioning like Alien Romulus, The Substance recently, which got really good word of mouth, Terrifier, Longlegs. There's been quite a few good ones. And I think, like we said with the marketing, I think marketing really does help horror films. And the minute people hear that it's actually genuinely scary, they'll get their butts in cinemas.
I agree with that. And in a place where box office isn't always the best, you're only really seeing animated films make a lot of money. A lot of these other films that you think are going to make a lot of money don't. But horror seems to be in a really good place in that regards. I think things like Shudder probably help. I know a lot of people aren't signed up to it, but you're getting 2-3 horror releases a month.
Definitely, yeah, and they're of good quality as well.
Yeah.
There's some that aren't, some that are, but the ones I've watched this month, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are genuinely great. I still think there's some work to be done with getting Shudder out there a little bit.
100%.
I think people know it exists, but they're not quite willing to take the plunge. But what I would say on that is, even the backlog of old horror they have on there, it's totally worth the subscription fee. Even if you're just getting it for October just to test it out, now's the perfect time. And it's really opened my eyes up to foreign cinema as well, especially. It makes a nice change. There's a lot of different things on there, lots of unique original ideas. I've watched some really good foreign ones on there this year.
But it doesn't quite feel like Netflix, where they're just throwing out any random thing every now and again, and it's just going to get lost in the light. It actually feels like they genuinely want these films to do well, which is nice. But like you said, I think it does need to be out there a bit more.
Yeah.
So, should we move on to our trick or treat segment?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So basically what we're going to do is Becca's picked some films that have come out in the past 2-3 months. And we're just going to go over the synopsis, hear Becca's thoughts, and then she's going to rate it trick or treat, basically. So whether you should watch it or whether you shouldn't. So shall we start with a film called The Radleys?
Let's do that. So this is one I was really, really excited for. I won't spoil too much because I think a lot of people will get something out of this one, but it's a vampire coming of age sort of comedy, and it's got Damian Lewis in it twice. He plays two characters, and it explores a lot of family drama and the coming of age element in terms of the children discovering that they are vampires, that sort of thing. On paper, it sounded really great. I really enjoyed the premise. But the further it played out, I just thought it was tackling way too much. There were some attempts at comedy that didn't work. The dialogue wasn't great. And as much as we love Damian Lewis, that was just... he didn't need to be in it twice. It was very, very odd. He plays twin brothers, and there's nothing really to distinguish them apart from one has long hair and one doesn't. And it just felt very gimmicky. Lack of horror as well. Obviously, we want these films to be scary now more than ever in October, and it just really didn't deliver on that front. I love a vampire film as much as the next person, but I am going trick for this one just because, too many ideas, not enough depth.
And if that does interest people, then I believe it's available on Sky Cinema, is that right?
Sky Cinema or Now TV,
Now TV, yeah. Okay, next film on your list is It's What's Inside.
This was an interesting one. I didn't know whether to mention this one or not because it is a little bit more of a thriller, but it has its gory moments, and it's got a really kind of spooky setting, and it's got a lot of mystery and intrigue to it, which I think lends itself well to this month. Go in as blind as possible with this one, and don't let the fact it's a Netflix original put you off, because it's genuinely quite well crafted. You've got a cast made up of just teens, and they're all really good, and they go to a party, and it's essentially a body swapping mystery where they're all swapping between each other, Scooby-Doo style, if you know what I mean. And it's, you don't know who's who, and there's a lot of mystery to it, lots of twists, lots of turns. Lots of really pretty cinematography and lighting as well. This one did take me by surprise. I'm going treat for this one.
Where can we find that as well?
That's a Netflix original. So they have managed to spit something out recently that's worth your time.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
Hopefully that doesn't get lost in amongst the algorithm and forever.
I haven't seen many people talk about it, and it has been out for a few weeks now. So if I can get just one person to check it out, then I'll have done my job.
Oh, the next one we've got is House of Spoils.
Another streamer. This one's on Amazon Prime for anyone that's interested. I was really looking forward to this one. The trailer and the synopsis were kind of giving like The Bear meets the Witch, and it's about food. It's got Ariana DeBose in it, who does give a very good performance. She plays a chef in it. She's just opened up her first restaurant. And all I'll say on this one is that she uses witchcraft to improve her food and try and get some backers for her business. Again, really interesting premise. The execution was really, really bland. I'm sorry to say that I actually struggled through this one. There's not any horror in here really at all. The backstory about the witch is just kind of dumped in one scene, so it doesn't feel very... It doesn't feel like it fits. The chef scenes are okay. The foodie scenes, if you like that sort of thing, they're fine. It's not the best out there though, and it's a very bland movie in tone, in aesthetic, in performances. You've got Ariana DeBose and Barbie Ferreira in here, who have really big personalities and really good delivery, but they're not utilised to their best. And yeah, it's just overall quite bland, so I am going trick for this one.
And that's available on Amazon Video.
I haven't really spoke to anyone else that's enjoyed this one either, so out of all of the ones on this list, I would say that is not the one to go for.
So the next one I've heard a little bit about is Daddy's Head.
I wonder why you've heard a lot about that. The title is a choice, I'll say that much. But it's putting it on people's radars, so I can't be that mad about it. But this one is a slow burn, a little bit more of a psychological one. But it has really, really good creature design, which does make up for that slower burn. And if you enjoy a slower paced horror flick, this is going to be perfect for you. It's pretty much one location as well. It's just following a stepmom and her stepson. Her partner / his dad has just passed away. These pair aren't getting on too great. She didn't want to be a mum, really, and they're kind of like thrown together and they only have each other. And then evil starts to lurk around, and it's kind of one of those where you're thinking, is it real? Is it their grief manifesting? And yeah, there's a lot of questions, a lot of mystery, and a slow burn that has a good climax, so it's worth sitting with. I really enjoyed this one. Really spooky tone. Dark premise, quite sad in places, but a really good exploration of grief. That's not rare in the horror genre, but it is done well here. So I am going treat for this one.
Oh, actually, that's... you did the review, obviously, for us, and I think this is one that I'm going to probably check out, actually. Out of all of these that we're speaking about, it's probably one that I'm going to check out, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you do enjoy a slower paced film. Just bear that in mind.
So now for your husband, Sam Claflin, and Bagman.
I might have watched Bagman just for Sam Claflin. That might have been what happened. I might have been really desperate and have had unnecessarily hyped myself for this film. It's not great. I'll have a review dropping soon. I don't know what will be out first, but there will be a full review out if you guys want to check it out. But I really wanted to like this one. Sam Claflin aside, like, it has got an interesting premise and there are some good ideas in here, but it just kind of forms into like your normal affair. It felt like a Blumhouse film, and I don't want to be rude towards Blumhouse because they do have some cracking films, but it just felt super generic. It was
Can be quite hit or miss, can't they?
Exactly that, and it just felt like I had the same feeling with Bagman that I had with Night Swim. I thought it was a really interesting premise on paper, but as soon as they start to execute it, you realise it's actually quite generic. It did attempt to have some stakes and some backstory. There is a mystery element to it, and it's kind of similar to Imaginary in the way that it's about a story that Sam Claflin's character was told when he was younger about this said Bagman that stayed with him for years, and now he's kind of putting that onto his child. Is absolutely terrified for his child, and you're kind of figuring out as it goes on whether this Bagman is real or whether it was just a story. There's a lot in here about how trauma can manifest and how those stories can impact your life. It just didn't quite go far enough with its development to make that worthwhile, and it really did lack scares. Any scares that were attempted were just jump scares. There wasn't really much in here for spooky season worth sitting with, unfortunately.
Even for me, really, like listening to that, I wouldn't say I'm a horror novice anymore, but I'm not exactly. I don't watch horror that often, but thinking about the premise, it sounds quite generic already.
Exactly.
I've already seen it before, and I've seen a handful of horror films compared to you and those.
I also think it's dumb that we've had Baghead and Bagman in the same year, because I have to like think about it every time I say one of them, and people are already getting confused.
I nearly got mixed up the other day, actually, when we were discussing it.
I wouldn't recommend either. So
that's definitely a trick then.
Indeed.
And the last one on your list is Mads.
This is one I'm really, really excited to talk about. So, like I was saying, with Shudder, there's some really, really unique, interesting stuff on here. And Mads is one that I didn't hear much about. All I knew is that it was done in that like kind of single take, one shot format, which can be quite gimmicky. So I'm always excited when I hear that, but I'm always a bit apprehensive as well. But I think Mads utilises that gimmick as well as it possibly could. It's a really high octane, energetic kind of zombie apocalypse style film.
Right up my street.
It like as soon as the title card drops, and I won't spoil what it looks like because it's my favourite title card reveal of the whole year. It's like up there with Evil Dead Rise for me. As soon as that title card drops, I was hooked, and it's kind of got like a shaky cam vibe. It's not as bad as like some other found footage stuff, but it follows the characters around so closely from scene to scene to scene. It moves so quickly. It's only like 85 minutes as well, and it utilises every second. There's a lot of gore. It's quite well spaced out, and it's really, really effective. There's a couple of jump scares. And it's one of those premises that's quite simple. It's just following a guy around as it starts. He's basically driving in his car, and some crazy lady all bandaged up gets in the car and just changes the whole trajectory of his evening. And then this zombie virus, whatever you want to call it, it has like a knock-on effect, and you see it kind of be passed around and how that affects people he comes into contact with. Really speedy runtime, really interesting premise. This one is under the radar, and it needs to be out there a little bit more, because I think a lot of people would love this.
Wicked. And that's on Shudder.
That
right?
is on Shudder, yeah. It's honestly, out of all the ones I've spoken about today, besides Terrifier, it's probably the best I've seen this month for new releases.
So definitely go and check that out.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our trick or treat. We're going to move on now to some of your horror favourites or recommendations. Before we go there, where did your love for horror sort of start? What's your relationship to horror?
I was always intrigued when I was a kid, and I was that sort of person that was just begging my parents to let me watch these films. My mum and dad both liked horror films when I was growing up, and I remember always being put to bed early so that they could watch one, and I was just always intrigued. I was like, what is this? Why can't I see it? What could be so bad that I'm not allowed to see it? So
Round the door.
yeah, exactly. I've been there many times. I've woken up to my mum screaming at horror films loads of times in the past, and she can't watch them anymore just because she blames it on her old age. She just can't do it anymore. But I just remember having that infatuation when I was younger, like before I even saw any. I just had to know what was so scary, what it was that I couldn't see. So I actually remember how old I was when I watched my first horror film, and I won't say what it was because we are talking about it today. But I remember begging to watch it, and there was a few of us at my mum's house, a few members of the family, and my mum gave in. She'd had a couple of drinks, and she said, fine, we'll watch it. The minute you get scared, we'll turn it off, and I've been hooked since. I absolutely loved it. My jaw was on the floor the whole time. My first ever horror film is my favourite horror film of all time still, and I think that's quite powerful. And it just showed me what the genre can be, because my favourite horror film isn't just scary, it's got a lot of other things going for it as well.
Yeah. I know exactly what film you're talking about.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of these horrors that you selected. I wanted to start with The Conjuring.
Yep.
So directed by James Wan. He obviously directed Saw before this. Since then, he's gone a little bit rogue with Furious 7, Aquaman, came back with Malignant. But this is a film that, I mean, it started a universe, really. You've got 9 movies. You've got another one coming next year, I believe.
The final one.
Yeah.
We'll see.
What do you like about The Conjuring?
Obviously, this film is not a hidden gem at all. Everyone has seen it. Everybody knows what it is. I couldn't not mention it, though, just because I do think it is the perfect ghost story, possession movie, whatever you want to call it, whatever bracket you put it under. I think it is a perfect example of one. It's one that I've watched countless amount of times, and it still manages to scare me. It is littered with jump scares, but they're generally effective. There's not one scare in here that doesn't work for me. And I think what sets this one apart from other sort of possession movies is the bond that you can create with these characters, especially Ed and Lorraine Warren. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time with them by now. They've been in further Conjuring movies and spin-offs. But even from that first movie, I think the performances are so good and the characters are explored so quickly that it's just so hard not to love those characters, and you just want to explore all these different spooky locations with them. And the same for the family that are being haunted. I just think they're a really natural, normal, relatable family. And there is always something extra spooky when stuff's happening towards children. It creeps me out.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the sort of detective side, the paranormal detective side, when they came in and, you know, they were trying to find out what was happening and still couldn't quite work it out. That was really good for me. I thought the setting was amazing. It was really eerie, atmospheric. You know, the house is creepy in itself before you even start seeing anything. Towards the end, the exorcism side of things, I generally get unaffected by these things anyway. When it gets a bit, I wouldn't say silly, but a bit more real. It's the paranormal side of things that get me,
And
especially.
once you've seen it and it's there, it's not as scary,
Yeah.
is it? Once it's in your face.
Especially when you got hands coming out the wardrobe, or jumping, doors closing, stuff like that. That's what really gets me. But it was actually my first time watching it, and I did really enjoy it. So
Are you compelled to check out the rest of the franchise now after the first one, or?
I'll get my way through eventually, I imagine. Speaking of this franchise, do you think it's the best one of the franchise?
I change my mind on this probably daily. The Conjuring 2 is equally fantastic, if not better. It's set in the UK as well. It's set in Enfield, based on the Enfield hauntings. So, as a British person, that makes it a little bit more relatable for me. I live near Enfield. I know all the stories, and those characters are just developed even further. And the scares, like there's one that I think about literally every day. There's a scare in that film that has not left my mind since it came out, and it's been out years.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, after seeing it, I am now wanting to go and visit the rest of them. Is there any I should avoid? I know they have very mixed reviews.
Yeah,
Few of them.
The Nun and The Nun 2, I probably like more than the average person just because I enjoy that style of film, but they are very bland. As is the first Annabelle. Annabelle 2 and 3 are okay, but the first one it's not great. But I think, The Conjuring 1 and 2, 3's fine, and Annabelle Creation is especially a good one. You get to see sort of the origins of Annabelle, so that's definitely worth checking out.
No, that's fine. Right, next. So this one actually shocked me at how much I enjoyed it. It's called As Above, So Below. I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score on it. Got 28% critic score.
No, 28%.
41% audience score.
Nope.
And I don't agree with it, frankly.
I'm glad you trusted me enough to check it out.
First sort of half an hour gave me a bit of National Treasure vibes, where they're sort of going around hunting, for work I was going on. As soon as they go down into the catacombs, it really impressed me. It's got mystery around it. You don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. I felt like because it's a self-shot film, isn't it? What do you call it? Can't think of the word. Found footage film, which I felt added a lot to the atmosphere. It made it feel claustrophobic. You sometimes could see what was going on with the characters. There was lights on them, sometimes lights on them, other times. It really, really did impress me. And actually, I had a really good time with it, to be fair.
Good. It's always one I recommend to people. It's not the most hidden gem of the found footage genre, but I do find a few people here and there that haven't seen it. And like you said, that Rotten Tomatoes score, that's insane to me. And anyone I know that has taken the time to watch this movie has generally enjoyed it. And it is my favourite of the found footage subgenre. I think the main reason for that is just because this genre is a little bit hit and miss. I think the best thing about As Above, So Below is how good the story is. A lot of the time it's just, with this genre, it's just frantic camera work and there's not really much of a tangible story. But As Above, So Below is very gritty. It's quite clever. It's about philosophy and the Philosopher's Stone and things like that. It does really clever things with the cinematography throughout. And like you said, the mystery element, I had no idea what was going on the first time I watched this.
Oh, you could actually see what was kind of, sometimes, like you said, with found footage, you can't really tell what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I feel like you could actually follow this story, and it actually added to the eeriness and the horror aspect of it.
I think we need more horror films set in the catacombs as well. I don't know why that's not more prevalent, honestly. Such a brilliant location.
The one thing that did put me off is not that he was bad in it, but Ben Feldman, who plays George, I'm a fan of Superstore. and he's one of the main characters in Superstore, and I couldn't see past it.
That is
for
a
most
you
of the
problem.
film.
That is a you problem. But no, I totally get
That
you.
is a me problem.
I'm sure there's another horror film he's been in, but I can't quite put my finger on it. That's going to bug me now. But
Friday
he
the
does
13th.
Friday the 13th, the remake, exactly.
Yeah, and he was in Cloverfield apparently.
Yeah, so
According to my
he's
research.
been around in horror.
He pops up. I
He
only
does
knew
pop
him
up.
from Superstore before this. And that's a totally different character, let's just say that.
Yeah, indeed.
This one's for you. The floor's yours. The Lost Boys.
Yeah, so
Tell
this,
us about it.
as I said earlier, this is the one. This is my favourite horror film of all time. And that does surprise people because as much as I love my horror, The Lost Boys isn't actually that scary. Maybe it was when it came out, but I think it's going for more of a campy, fun edge, and I respect the hell out of that. Like, as an impressionable 10-year-old, when I watched this film, I just fell in love with the aesthetic immediately. Like, how cool the vampires were. I wanted to be them. I wanted to be in their crew. They kind of like represent that like outcast kind of group. And I was an edgy teen, so I fell for that completely. And I was like, oh yeah, that's so me. And I just related to it straight away. I also think this film has the best soundtrack ever put to a film, which you can argue, but that's my opinion on that. It does have its moments of gore. It's got some good kills, and what I like about the horror is that you don't see everything straight away. Too often these days, everything's shown in the trailer or within the first 5 minutes of the film. With The Lost Boys, you don't really see the vampires in all their glory, teeth and everything until the very end. So I do think that keeps up the mystery a little bit, and then it allows for a really, really fun climax, which is some of my favourite cinema ever. Just how energetic, how fun that climax is. So much blood is spilled, the kills are really inventive, and I think this is a blueprint for vampire films. I'd love to know what you thought of it, watching it kind of now for the first time.
So, obviously, it's from when 1980.
83, I believe, or 87.
84?
87?
Yeah,
Who knows?
around the 80s. I love the sort of the vampire gang side of things that you don't really see much of them. They're quite cheesingly menacing.
Definitely.
It's I wasn't 100% sure on the relationship between Star and Michael. We didn't really see the development of it. It kind of just happened almost, but yeah, that didn't take away from the film really. Like you said, building up to sort of Star sort of act, I do feel like it did a good job in keep things a bit of a mystery. You're not quite sure where it's going to go, who's going to react. I think that's mainly down to the vampire side of things not quite being in your face as they normally are.
Yeah. I like how it includes a lot of the vampire tropes as well and kind of flips them. Like the typical things you'd expect, holy water, garlic. Some of them work, some of them don't. And if this came out now, it would probably be a little bit tired, but I love how it includes all of that kind of generic stuff that we expect, and it makes fun out of it a little bit.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun with the vampire hunters.
The Frog
were
Brothers,
basically just a bunch of kids. The inexperience of them, they were so serious, but almost a bit stupid at times, and I enjoyed that. Definitely enjoyed that side of things. But yeah, for the first time watch for a film that's nearly 40 years old.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good.
I saw it when it re-released in cinemas this year, and that was such an experience. Really reactive crowd, everyone there singing along, clapping. It was brilliant. And I just think, Kiefer Sutherland is the coolest vampire ever put to screen in this film as David. I just think he's awesome.
To be fair, I know the other three didn't have as much sort of to do, but I felt like they sort of bounced off each other quite well.
It's just a ragtag group of friends causing chaos, and it's so much fun. And there is like a coming of age element to it as well, with the characters that aren't vampires, like speak about divorce, losing their father, moving, starting a new school, things like that. And it's just, I think it's got a lot on offer, and it's a really good sort of, don't know if it was intended to be a comedy when it came out, but it is a really fun horror
Yeah,
comedy that
definitely.
taught me from a young age that horror doesn't just have to be scary. It can be goofy, it can be campy, it can be fun.
So, the next one we're going to talk about is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. So
This
this
is
is
another
actually
sort of
available on.
underrated one, I think.
See, I'd actually not seen any of these movies. Let's just put it out there now. But I have now watched them all. This is now it's available on Netflix. It's from the director Andre Oradal, who did a film that I really enjoyed a few years ago called Troll Hunter. And what I liked about it is the one location, two main characters, which are played by Emile Hirsch and Brian Cox. It felt very trapped. You didn't quite know what was going on. The history of this Jane Doe character is kind of unraveling as they're going through it. It gets scarier and scarier. Times I thought was fairly predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And the scares were quite mid, but the actual story I really enjoyed. Sort of the way it unraveled as it sort of got through. There was a fair amount of tension, between the characters. What was going to happen next? Who was going to die, or whether they're going to die? Yeah, what do you think of it?
So I always recommend this one for one that's a little bit underseen. And I also think, as you said, the scares aren't amazing. It's not the scariest film, but I think it's a really good kind of, if you want to watch something spooky but you're a little bit of a wimp, I think this is the perfect film. It's not it's a good gateway horror. Yeah, there you go. It's a good little gateway horror because there is a little bit of body horror in here. Of course, they are performing an autopsy, so naturally, but then there's also some more generic scares like your jump scares and things like that. The reason I love this film so much is what you highlighted. It's just one location and the most simple premise. It's a father and son who are performing an autopsy on a body, and they don't know anything about how she died. And the further we go along in the autopsy, the more questions we have, and it ends up being something really, really interesting and unique. There's not many films that kind of explore this idea, and I do find it very unique. And of course, Brian Cox and Emile Hirsch are just fantastic. Two great actors.
So, moving on then to our last film is Trick or Treat, 2007 film. So I watched this last night before last. Thought it was a very campy flick. It was almost halfway to a parody kind of movie. Gave me a bit of scary movie vibes, but didn't quite commit to that. I really like sort of the anthology side of things because it's 4 or 5 different stories, isn't it? Sort of all come together towards the end, which was good. It had really fun kills, lots of surprises. I won't try and spoil too much, but you get thoughts of vampires, pumpkin carving, potential of werewolves. You kind of don't know what's coming next. And I found it really well paced, actually, over sort of one night. Sometimes these one night horrors can be a bit slow because they're kind of in real time, but I felt the characters pushed the story on well. You didn't have to kind of follow one. You didn't really know. You knew what was happening and when it was happening. I really enjoyed it, actually, and I think I liked that campiness. The campy side of it wasn't quite horror. It was a little bit of fun.
The reason I've mentioned this, I wanted to talk about this film today. Most people have already seen it, but there is a reason for that. This is the perfect film to watch on Halloween. The title obviously gives that away loud and clear. It's called Trick or Treat, and like you said, it's got a bit of everything in it in terms of what horror can provide. It is fun. Like if you're spending Halloween in with friends, family, partner, whatever, this is such a fun one to watch. It has got some gore in it. It's got some decent kills. It's got a really fun villain in Sam. I think he's quite fun, and I'd really like to see more of him. But what I like about it as well is these anthologies can be hit or miss. We get obviously the main one to talk about with anthologies is VHS, and they are so renowned for having some really good shorts and some really bad ones. What I like about Trick or Treat is that every story is great, and that it all intertwines. It all kind of builds one big picture rather than them all being separate, which I think does make it feel a little bit more cohesive. You're following lots of different characters, but you're kind of in one sort of place, and I do think that adds a lot of merit to it.
You never feel like you're not understanding what's going on. You don't have to think about one story rather than the other.
That can be quite jarring with anthologies, especially when they change tones. But this one is really tonally consistent. Good mix of fun, comedy, and horror. And it's just the spooky vibes are unmatched. It's a Halloween film through and through. You've got pumpkins, decorations, trick-or-treating. It's just the perfect film to watch on Halloween.
I really enjoyed the character of Stephen.
Which one's
who
Stephen?
Was he was the principal with the son, and he kept telling this son off. Yeah. And the progression of his character intrigued me the whole way through.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Right to the end. So that finishes our horror talk. What are you going to be catching up on, do you think, over the next few weeks?
So the day we're recording this is actually National Horror Movie Day, so I'll definitely be watching some bits and bobs tonight. I'm going to watch some familiar stuff. I've watched a lot of new releases lately. I think I'm just going to pad out the rest of October with some faves, some spooky favourites that get me into that spooky feeling a little bit more. I'm going to check out I Know What We Did Last Summer. I'm going to watch Scream. I'm going to watch Halloween, just to get into that sort of spooky vibe, because we're nearly there.
1 week away, just over a week away, and Halloween's here. So thank you very much for joining us. Like and subscribe and share this podcast. You can find more of our work at filmfocusonline.com, and we are on all socials at filmfocusonline.